Hello, everyone. So I don't usually show my face, but I don't really like to. But I feel like it's kind of necessary going forward to a certain extent. I'm just kind of thinking of things differently. I've been watching a lot of YouTube. I've been watching a lot of different content, and one of the things that's kind of coming to mind, I guess one of the reasons that I'm thinking I needed to do things a little bit differently, not because I think I've been doing anything badly or that I really give a shit, to be honest, but because I just wanted to kind of be here in your face saying that I think that this focus on natal astrology is going to relegate and consign astrology and astrologers to irrelevance. And the reason I'm saying so is as a result of kind of learning mundane astrology and also watching all of the stuff I'm watching on YouTube. So much of the environment on YouTube is commentary. So much of it is commentary, social commentary, commentary on gossip, commentary on politics, commentary on the news, commentary, right? And so in general, cultural, it's all cultural, which we can't really fully connect to if we're just focusing on natal astrology. But we can if we're using something like mundane. And because we're in a moment that's so crucial, that's so transitional, that's so precarious, right? We're in a really precarious social moment, a moment in history right now. How can we as astrologers contribute to this moment? Right, as natally we can't. I mean, we can do one person at a time, the usual kind of bullshit with that, right? But that's not really what's necessary now. Atomization, and focus on the individual is not necessarily what's needed in this particular moment, which is one of the problems, right? The United States is having, is making the adjustment from individualism to collectivism, which is something we're going to talk about. But the main reason this is one of the main reasons I'm talking about this. The title is why mundane astrology matters, and it matters because if indeed we are participating in our culture, right? If we're participating in this moment, then we want to participate in a way as astrologers that is going to, I'm always talking about how can we make astrology better, right? So that was something, especially when I was on Clubhouse and surrounded by nincompoops, it was always about, hey, how is what you're doing making astrology better? It's not. And how can we do it? And so this is part two of that discussion. How can we be making astrology better? How can our contribution make the effect of astrology and astrology's impact on the world more important and more interesting and more necessary even? I mean, I don't think it has to be necessary, but it's been around for thousands of years. It's been around longer than the Catholic Church, right? The Roman Catholic Church. So there's something about it that is hanging on. And so I think what I want to do today is I want to basically kind of imitate what it is I'm seeing on YouTube and show how mundane astrology can do these things. So in my very first video, which was called Introduction to Mundane Astrology, we found the Lord of the Year and we found the Lord, or rather the significator of the King. And, but neither of those planets, or they were the same planet, mind you, that planet was not the ruler of the ascendant. That planet was not the ruler of the ascendant. Thus, we did talk about it, but I want to go back to it because I'm seeing it show up all the time right now. And one of the ways that I'm seeing it show up is through, now remember that Gemini and Pisces and Sagittarius and Virgo are all double-bodied signs. And one of the ways I'm seeing it is in double speak. There's all of this double speak. Now, as an African American in the United States, there is a deep understanding of what is called white double speak. And that's almost all political speak is white double speak, is double speak. However, the general culture, and even let's talk about this as in double, because we can even talk about the United States culture in this particular, because I'm going to focus United States, right? This is where the solar revolution is. We can even think about the United States as being two different states, two different not like, one state, two, like a state, like, California or blah, 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 but it's two states. One being the normative state and one being what's called the prerogative state. And so most African Americans belong to the prerogative state. The prerogative state is basically wielded against minorities, the undesirables, criminals, homeless. The normative state is basically that which establishes all of our norms and what status quo, the suburbs, good schools, the taxes around the tax system, around school systems. But a lot of what the normative state does is conceal, help people stay comfortable and not, and then also demonize the members of the prerogative state. So we've got these two states, and as a result of being a member of the prerogative state, we're very sensitive to what is called doublespeak. People in the normative state are not, and so what we're tending to see is that and I'm just going to say white, because mostly the white people are in the normative state, the black people are not. And now we've got immigrants there, we've got the homeless there, we've got old people that are there. I mean, there's quite a few. It's getting bigger. Even children, to a certain extent, are members of the prerogative state, because they have no rights. But so as a result, we've got these two different states that are kind of happening, and that's an aspect of this. Remember what I think isn't Gemini? Look, isn't Gemini the rising sign of the Sibley chart for the United States? So we've got two states, we've got two different concepts, and this idea of doublespeak. Mercury rules the tongue. Mercury rules news, rules communication. Note here that the Mercury is in Pisces, so doublespeak it's going to be, but it's also going to be reversals, forwards and backwards, and reversals, and muddled. It's going to be muddled and nonsensical. There will be muddled, nonsensical messaging. We can think about Gemini as messaging even, right? So this year is about the messaging to a certain extent. It's about the messaging, it's about the intelligence, it's about the news, it's about the information we receive, right? And so far, the information that we receive tends to be of different types, right? We tend to receive, especially around the war. Where's Mercury? Mercury is with Mars, who is the god of war. Around the war, what did we receive? We received muddled messaging around why we're there. We've always been at war. We've been at war with Iran for 47 years. We can't let them get a nuclear weapon. But prior to that, the intelligence, there's Mercury, prior to that, the intelligence said that they were not a threat. All of a sudden they're a threat. There's the double speak. There's the double speak. There's the muddled thinking, or not the muddled thinking, but the muddled messaging. There's all around this entire war. It's been why are we there? There's been reason after reason. Then the muddled messaging has been around the Strait of Hormuz, and we're going to go into that more deeply, because as we see here, Mercury is in Pisces, his fall. Thus the muddled messaging, right? Or thus the inability to be clear. There will be a lack of clarity in the messaging. But also with Rahu, who we call the agent of ambition, and who is a shadowy figure. So Rahu represents ghosts and organized crime and politics, because it happens behind closed doors. So shadowy. So we've got this shadowy aspect to the way that things are going to be, which means going to be communicated, which means that intentions are not going to be clear and pure. Because Rahu is also what you will do to get what you want. And the example that I like to use for Rahu is Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan. Tanya Harding, saw how good Nancy Kerrigan was, and she went out and she hired goons to kneecap the bitch. That's a Rahu act. She wanted it so bad that she would hurt her opponent. She would hurt her opponent's choices or options or ability. So that's a Rahu thing. That's what this messaging. So this messaging is around the ruthlessness, right? So that's first of all, because Mercury and Rahu are so close. So there's this ruthless messaging, shadowy, ruthless messaging, where we can't really tell what the truth is, right? We can't see the light of clarity, right? No sunlight, no sun, because, right, who eclipses the sun? Rahu and Ketu, right? So no sunlight can get into this messaging, which means that we can always assume the worst, and which is what we're doing whenever they tell us anything. Think about the two. Oh, perfect example. Oh my God, I hadn't even thought about this before. This is like the third time I tried to record this fucking thing. So note that Mercury is with Mars. Mercury is with Mars, which already obviously we talked about war. Mars is war. Mercury, Mars is a soldier. But Mars is also violence, right? We know it as violence and drawing blood, etc. Think about the assassination attempts that have happened and how no one believes them, right? No one believes his assassination attempt. No one believes the Charlie Kirk assassination attempt. No one believes anything about the assassination, the quote assassination attempt that happened. And I mean, as you can see, I put it in quotes, so you know I don't fucking believe it. That happened at the correspondence dinner, right? So that's a great example of how, as a result of the shadowy, nebulous nature of what's behind the messaging, no one trusts it. Okay, so that's the Mercury Rahu aspect, and then with Mars on top of that, we have acts of violence that happen, but still nobody trusts the messaging because of the Mercury Rahu. We can feel that there's something off. We can't see it, right? Because Rahu is shadowy. Rahu is outside of the light, right? Or lack of light. But we can feel that something's off about it, and so thus no one believes. So thus it's not believable. This is a very important part of this. This lack of belief in the messaging, this no one's accepting the messaging, that's a really big part of what's going on this year. But the thing that I wanted, I mean, this is something new. This is, like I said, this just came up this particular time. But the thing that I really wanted to come back or to revisit with this Mercury Mars and with the Rahu Mercury Mars, remember Rahu is the agent of ambition. Is how Mercury Mars represents criminality, and how this war, Mars is the god of war, Mercury Mars is a soldier, and Mercury Mars is lies and obfuscation and all of that. You know, Mercury is the ruler of the tongue, right? And all the ways that we communicate in speech. How this is in a watery sign, and how the linchpin of the entire war is the Strait of Hormuz. The linchpin of this entire war effort, of everything, right now, everything that is happening in this world right now, all of the calamities that we are experiencing are because of the Strait of Hormuz. Note that the Mercury and the Mars are in water, and the Rahu are all in water signs. Okay, so and also note that water sign, Pisces, is ruled by Jupiter, who is also the ruler of the 7th house, which is the open enemy. And note that the open enemy is exalted in a water sign. This water sign has exalted our enemy. This body of water, as a result of entering this war, what they have done with this body of water has ended up exalting our enemy. And there is no winning. There is no winning this war. There is no as far as the United States is concerned. From what I've been listening to and understanding, there is no winning this war. There's no ground troop. There's no troops on the ground. That hasn't happened. He wants to do more of these more strikes. He's been threatening strikes. Here, this is a great example of the messaging. Threatening strikes, and then the day after, a negotiation's going to happen. Negotiations, Mercury. So all of this obfuscation and all of this back and forth around negotiations, Mercury. All this messaging, all this muddled messaging around what we're going to do next with them, Mercury. Mercury in Pisces. It ain't going well. It ain't happening right? So as a result, now this water has become like this issue with the water, and thus with the oil, right? Thus with the oil that can't get through, has fucked up the entire world's economy, and this is kind of where we are right now. So that's the first thing that I thought I would share about. This next video is from Heather Cox Richardson, where she talks about this.
Attempt, as it came out today, of Iran and perhaps Oman to normalize placing tolls on the Strait of Hormuz is not just a toll booth. That is, there are theories about the way world trade is supposed to work. And one of the ones that has been central to global prosperity since World War II, but that has a much longer history in the United States of America, is freedom of the seas. And with the end of freedom of the seas through the Strait of Hormuz, a number of countries that also have straits nearby are starting to say, well, if you can do it there, we can do it here. And what we are facing is the end of that concept of freedom of the seas that has enabled us to have free trade since World War II, which has really facilitated global economic growth and has facilitated the rise of more than 1 billion people out of poverty in that period. That's a really big deal that sometimes it's a little bit hard to see when you're focusing just on the extraordinary cost of that war to the Iranian people, to the American people, to the Gulf countries who are in real trouble, and so on. There is a much larger principle at stake there of freedom of the seas. The attempt.
Okay, so we see what that is basically kind of about, right? We're seeing how crucial the Strait of Hormuz is, and how the war itself is changing the paradigm of free trade in the world. And of course, who rules trade? Mercury. Right, so that's another aspect. And the seas. So it's trade of the seas, and how the war, Mars and Rahu, right? The war, Mars and Rahu, the ambition behind the war, the nebulous intentions behind the war are basically affecting trade on the seas. Mercury. And halting it. Stationary. Mercury is stationary. It's halting. It has the ability to halt trade on the seas. Business. Mercury is business. Mercury is trade. Mercury is buying and selling. All of that. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second, so once again, so this is how we can participate in these conversations. This is how we can, and actually not just participate, but contribute, right? Because on March 20th, we could have come to these particular inferences about what might happen. Now we can see them happening in real time, and I'll continue to bring stuff out, right? But if we're astrologers worth our salt, not really worth our salt, but usually what most mundane astrologers are interested in is prediction. They want to predict. They want to predict and get it right. Now that's great, but we're seeing, but that's also not, in my opinion, not actually fully contributing to this moment. It's not about tricks. It's not about tricks and being, it is about being the best, absolutely, always. But it's not about tricks. It's about how we as astrologers can really be contributing, how we as astrologers can really be adding to the conversation and pushing the conversation forward and pushing the ideas of where we might need to be going forward as also, which I want to come to next. So when we did our very first video, which was called Introduction to Mundane Astrology, we came to the understanding that the ruler of the year and the significator of the king were not the ruler of the ascendant, as I mentioned earlier. And what we did understand was that they were both the sun. Okay, so the sun is the ruler of the year and the significator for the king. So as I've been reading a little bit further, here's another way that I think that we can be contributing, is the Lord of the Year basically rules over kind of everybody who isn't the king. The king, who is significant, or the king rules over the king. And obviously they're experiencing, what we're finding is here we've got that same significator is approaching Neptune and Saturn, right? And the Saturn, of course, is restriction and corruption, right? So Saturn is the ruler of corruption. Right, and he's fallen here, so he can be as misbehaved as he wants. He can be as badly behaved as he wants to be, right? And the sun is applying to him. So, and the sun, remember, is exceedingly hot and dry, and Saturn is exceedingly hot and cold, or cold and dry. So that means that whatever fate is happening to the king, I mean, based on what I'm looking at, right, is happening also to us. The corruption, right, the king is showing corruption. They're showing signs of corruption or showing how corrupt he himself actually is. But in return, he corrupts our society. And we can see it especially with all of these young kids. You know, I have a lot of friends who have children and friends who are in interracial relationships or are Asian or are black or whatever, and their kids are coming home and talking about how little white kids are you know, calling them the N-word or telling them they're ugly because their skin color is dark or whatever. It's how they're emboldening the worst behavior, this is the corruption. So his own corruption, his own personal corruption, is also becoming a mirror of corruption for us, for the rest of the culture. So we're seeing that happening, and also he's in demise. This is, I mean, basically, this is good for neither planet, right? Even though the sun is very well, you know, is in a very good position in his exaltation, he's going to a fallen Saturn. So he's applying to a planet in its fall, which is already an impediment, and then he's applying to Saturn, who's the ruler of his opposition, right? Who's the ruler of his, you know, it's the ruler of Aquarius, the ruler of his detriment, right? So he's moving to that and fall. Well, not his fall, but he's the exaltation ruler of his fall, right? So he's moving to that. And so that's demise. That's not just corruption, but that's demise, that's limitation. And same thing for us. So his demise, unfortunately, is our demise as well. But the message that I wanted to actually focus on is note that the Lord of the Year, we're just going to look at it for Lord of the Year, is in the 11th house. And when I've been looking at the significations for the 11th house in the Benatti book that I'm reading on Mundane Astrology, he focuses on two things. He focuses on the amiability between friends, and he focuses on hope, the sustainment of hope, the sustentation of hope, or the sustaining of hope. And that is really an important message. So this is, once again, here we are with how we can be participating, because what I'm seeing all the time is people are panicking. People are panicking. People are quote losing hope. People are falling into doom kind of understanding, or nihilism, or that it doesn't matter, or that we're cooked, or people are kneeling, are bending the knee ahead of time. People are really feeling cowed by what's going on. And what the chart, in my opinion, is implying is that the key, as I kind of mentioned, is away from the atomization. Note that the sun is in Aries, but Aries isn't on the cusp. Aries isn't on the cusp of the 11th house. The sun is at 1 degree away from the cusp, but Aries is not on the cusp of the 11th. Pisces is. So that's a very different thing. If Aries were on the cusp of it, then it would say, hey, fight, fight, fight. But what it's really also, in my opinion, part of what it's saying is sustain hope, find community, and sustain hope. Move away from the atomization of the individual, which is what Sun and Aries really on the personal level can kind of mean, right? And into this, find the amiability within friends, find the mutuality, find the what do they call it? Mutual aid. Find the way to aid each other based on your amiability, based on the cooperation. Find ways to cooperate in groups. Well, I mean, groups is kind of a later thing for the 11th, but it is talking about the amiability, the way that we together as friends, how we create friendships based on common values and understandings and that cooperation. And note that the ruler of the 11th house is exalted. Hope. Jupiter is hope. The 11th house is hope. Jupiter is the 11th house is his joy. He rejoices in the 11th. So that's saying something. It's basically kind of saying, hey, find your group, find your people, and use that unit to sustain your hope, to find a way to sustain hope. Okay, so that's yet another way that we can be useful in, hey, what do we do about this? Well, boom, this is what the Lord of the Year says in the chart. This is what we should be doing. We should not be giving up. The Lord of the Year is exalted in Aries. Fight. Advance. Take action. Do something. In a group. Work with people that you love, with people that you respect and love and who cherish you, etc. And don't lose hope and sustain hope. Build hope, even, to a certain extent. Okay, so that's the other little thing that mundane astrology offers. So we just found, we found one, we're going to find many, right? We found one perfect signification that fits in the news for right now, based on what we're looking at. We found another that basically addresses how to be working with the moment that we're in. That we can't do that as natal astrologers. We can do it on the individual level, but in my opinion right now, the individual level is not important. It's the group level, which the chart itself is also pointing to. Note also that the ruler of the ascendant is in Pisces, which is the sign on the cusp of the 11th. Okay, so coming back to this Mercury-Mars-Rahu combination in Pisces here, the other aspect of Mercury-Mars is highwayman robbery, criminality, crime, straight up, crime, corruption, criminality, and of course remember that the Rahu is the underground crime, right? It's the what do we call it? Like the mob, basically. So ultimately, all of that is going to be, and it's in the 10th house. It's not nowhere near the cusp of the 11th. So it's in the most, even though it doesn't belong to the cusp of the house, it's going to be extremely visible. So we should see extremely visible examples of corruption, things that look like organized crime, things that look like organized crime and criminality, kind of overt, extrovert criminality is what lies. We've already talked about the messaging part of this, but now we're talking about how Mercury uses skill to subvert the law or to transgress, right? Mars can be transgression, subversion, violence, robbery, all of the lawlessness. So how Mercury can use skill towards lawlessness. But the interesting thing about it is, Mercury here is in Pisces. Mercury is intelligence, right? And so Mercury's not very intelligent in Pisces. I mean, it's a different type of intelligence. I'm not saying people with Mercury in Pisces are intelligent, but we are being run by nincompoops, right? We're being run by amateurs. Mercury is skill. Mercury in Pisces is the fall of Mercury, which means that the skill, there either are unconventional skills, like Venusian, Jupiterian type skills, or that the person's an idiot or an amateur, and we're being run by amateurs. So this next level is amateurs, venal amateurs who are trying to operate on a criminal level that's highly overt. And of course, we have two examples of that. The first is the ballroom, the Trump ballroom that originally was going to be funded by billionaires, right? It was going to be funded by his billionaire friends for $200 million. Then it became $400 million. Then all of a sudden it was $1 billion, and it's in the reconciliation bill, and we, the taxpayers, are paying for it. So that is our first example of just straight up corruption, criminality, acting like a mob, acting like organized crime. But this next one is even worse. So Trump, Schittler, that is, has, okay, so the story is this. Back in, I think, 2020 or 2016 or somewhere around there, 2020, 24 or something around there, 24, I think, or somewhere around there, a contractor with the IRS leaked a bunch of tax returns, among which were the tax returns of Trump and family. An investigation ensued, if I'm not incorrect, and it turns out that they owe probably close to $100 million worth of taxes. Schittler and his family, when he became president, they sued the IRS for $16 million or $11 billion, rather $11 billion, I think it was. And so then the Department of Justice, which is headed right now by his personal lawyer, Todd Blanche, they negotiated, Mercury, a settlement for $1.776 billion. 1776, $1.776 billion as a slush fund to pay the defendants of the January 6th, or pay the people who had been indicted for the January 6th crimes. They're calling it the Weaponization Fund. Doublespeak, Mars, Mercury. Mars is weapons. Mercury is the doublespeak. Another term that they're using a lot is lawfare. I'm seeing that term being used, lawfare. So watch these words, watch the language and the things that they're using, because once again, Rahu is behind most of this messaging, and Rahu's intentions are never good.
General had a meeting with Senate Republicans about this slush fund for January 6th insurrectionists, and it did not go well, y'all. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Republicans are kind of at each other's throats right now. Whether it's going to resort to metaphorical fisticuffs or not, it means that Republicans are not able to get their shit together and advance any of Donald Trump's awful plans right now. So with regards to this slush fund, which Donald Trump calls the anti-weaponization fund, yeah, a number of Senate Republicans are not down with this at all because, one, they know that it's hella illegal, and two, because it's politically absolutely stupid and devastating for them to get on board with this. This is right on the heels of all of the Senate Republicans inexplicably, right, except for Cassidy, who's on his way out, and Tillis, who's on his way out, standing up for supporting Donald Trump using $1 billion of taxpayer money to have his giant Fuhrer bunker ballroom built. And it's only because the Senate parliamentarian noped it and the people were so fucking outraged that Senate Republicans realized, what the hell are we doing? Our numbers are so bad going into the midterms. People are really worried about the economy. They're worried about corruption. And we're going to give $1 billion taxpayer dollars to Donald Trump for a ballroom. So when the parliamentarian noped it, suddenly you saw Senator Kennedy and a number of others coming forward and saying, we don't have the votes to rework this. This is DOA. What a debacle for all of the Republicans and Donald Trump when it came to the ballroom. And then we have, right after that, this slush fund for January 6ers. And I learned something today that I think is being overlooked in the news. It is being widely reported that Donald Trump's anti-weaponization fund, aka January 6er slush fund, is for $1.8 billion. But that's not true. It's for $1.776 billion, and that difference matters. I didn't realize that. I had also said $1.8 billion because I didn't realize that it was $1.776 billion until I saw this earlier today. Allison Gill, this is an amazing troll. So she applied to Donald Trump's slush fund for $8.647 million in damages.
Okay, so thus we're seeing that, right? And then on top of it, we've got another, one where, or rather, I just want to bring your attention to this headline. Yeah, this one. This headline, Trump's January 6th slush fund is a criminal enterprise. The president has long been operating under the assumption that he is immune from prosecution. His latest scheme, however, may be a step too far. The Trump administration set the stage for the largest heist, highwayman robbery, remember, in American history this week by creating an illegal, right, lawlessness, fund of taxpayer dollars to compensate President Donald Trump and his allies, including the January 6th insurrectionists, for being brought to justice after storming the Capitol in 2021. So, we have that, right? So we've got that. And okay, so those are the kind of the two things connected to the solar revolution that I wanted to bring our attention to. But what I want to bring our attention to next is what's happening in the lunar revolution. So the lunar return, what I remember learning from Robert Zoller back in the 90s when I took his course was that you generally only look to see what's going on, what planets are angular in a lunar return. Now, obviously, if anybody has worked with them and has worked differently with them and has a track record with them, please let me know. I'm happy to talk with you about it. But that's just what I'm gonna do. That's just what I remember him saying. We didn't work extensively with them, but that's what I remember him saying. So what I'm gonna do is just look at the Venus here, and then maybe look also at the Moon Mars, right? Because it's a lunar return, thus we want to see whatever's going on with the Moon. Really, it's Moon Jupiter, right? Because Moon's next application is to Jupiter, and that even makes sense because but think about it. I don't want to fuck that. Okay, I was doing that because I did listen to it. I have to use them to listen, but I don't need to talk. But that makes sense, right? Because what do we see happening here? We've got the president trying to get money. Right, the ruler of the second, right, this is the ruler of the second, right, the moon rules the second this month. And so right now, all of the attention is on the second. Though also, this is the part of spirit, which we were talking about as hidden future things that we don't know about. So a hidden future, so we can see how the moon is applying to the planet in the second. Right, it's applying to the planet in the second. It's the ruler of the second applying to the second. So it's trying to gain. Right, it's trying to gain substance. There's going to be a gain of substance that's kind of happening, and of course it becomes public, but it's not particularly public because neither of those are in angles. But that's kind of what's going on. This shall we say that's like the main background? Is this main background of maybe and no, it's with Mars now too. So or rather Mars coming at a certain point. Oh, that's right. That's this other thing. Okay, so there's this Moon Jupiter thing happening, and this need and it's a square. So there are challenges around financial gain. Okay, so that's the first thing that we can look at. Challenges around financial gain, which we just saw. Then the next thing is that the Moon is relatively close to Mars, and so is the planet that is in the ascendant. Mars rules the 6th and the 11th. What also has been in the news? Ebola and hantaviruses. Both of these create high fevers. Ebola and hantavirus. Mars tends to represent things that create high fevers, rashes and fevers and flus and things of that nature. Anything that makes you feverish or that heats you up unduly as a result. Mars, and these were seemingly hidden. These are coming out of kind of hidden parts of the world. One of them came from a cruise ship on the water. Now, but the next one, the thing that I really love, and this is the angular. This is angular. So note here that once again, Gemini is the ascendant, intelligence, messaging, communications. But this time, the Mercury is in Taurus in the 12th. And note that the part of fortune is in the 12th here too. Part of fortune represents enemies. I mean, not part of fortune, the 12th house represents enemies. It's known as the house of enemies, like a secret enemy, right? This Mercury is giving intelligence from possibly an enemy, and it's up in a female sign, right? Female sign of Taurus, and it's a Venus sign, which is, tends to be relationships and sex and love and that type of stuff. And the sun, of course, exposes, right? Mercury sun can often represent kind of wisdom or wisdom revealed. So, and then we've got the Venus here in the ascendant. And she's within 15 degrees, so she's in the active part of the ascendant. And she's in this exchange with the Mercury. So, and Venus is women, Mercury's in a female sign, Mercury's intelligence, Venus is in Gemini, which is about intelligence. So what just happened? Ashley St. Clair, who is one of Elon Musk's baby mamas, just exposed operations in the magosphere. She exposed quite a few things. One of the things that she exposed is that she believes that maybe the 2024 election was fucked over, was basically stolen. But she really gave us she revealed, right, Mercury Sun, she revealed all this tea, all this information about this network of influencers messaging and how they were all in lockstep around messaging, lockstep, Taurus, fixed sign, lockstep messaging. So that's going to be our next little thing.
You've been outspoken about the coordinated campaigns that you say are driving MAGA accounts and influencers online. You've done these TikTok videos that have gone viral, exposing some of the chats with some of your receipts. Just to be clear, what is the accusation here for people who are not following you on TikTok? Is it that MAGA influencers, the people you see on Twitter, the people who are pundits on cable news, they are all in one chat and they are getting specific talking points sent to them by Caroline Leavitt and the White House?
Well, there's not just one chat. There's multiple chats that they operate in. And these chats also have, some are just sequestered to large MAGA influencers in which they send these paid campaigns. Others have members of the administration. Others have, the Trump children. And they coordinate this messaging and react to things in real time. Here's how we respond or don't respond to any given issue at any given time. They also have the paid campaigns in which messaging is pushed out. And it is very much coordinated through both paid messaging and just wanting to be in the club and not be ostracized.
Were you in these chats yourself? You've seen this firsthand?
Yes. Those screenshots are from me. I was in these chats.
And these chats are not just, lower level freaks. These are big names of the conservative media machine.
Members of Congress, members of the administration, people at the White House, people with the last name Trump.
Would someone like a Tucker Carlson have been in there until recently?
Tucker would not have been in something like this. He doesn't really use social media.
But you mentioned, for example, the Trump children. You're talking about Don and Eric are in these chats getting right into what the talking point should be.
I was in one in which Eric was in one, yes.
And who's in charge of all this? You say coordinator, like who is the person pulling all the strings?
So members of the administration, people like James Blair, who run messaging for the admin and the White House and the campaign. And there's also people who run these consulting houses, these right-wing consulting houses that push a lot of this out because they have some plausible deniability and they can hide the money. So once the money goes from the campaign to the consulting house, they can then distribute it to the influencers and it's not on any FEC report.
So what you're basically saying is, when I see a MAGA person online take any position, my starting point should be, is this really his position or did it come from the White House? Is this really his position or was he paid for it?
Correct.
How much do you get?
Bam. So we can join the conversation, but we just have to have the right tool. Yeah, we can join the conversation. We can do content like they do, and we can be relevant. At this point, what's going to happen to you with this eclipse and that kind of stuff? That's lovely, but really at this point, we need to be plugged into the moment and how we can be assisting with whatever revolutionary things need to be happening or to make life better for everyone. All right, that's where I am.